Will Deputy Counsel Dan Lennington, my attorney, joins us on this edition of the Dan O'Donnell Show with yours truly, Matt Kittle. Daniel, my brother, you are older than me. Do you still feel the pain? How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to talk to our favorite client, Matt Kittle of the Federalist and innumerable radio talk shows. So we appreciate the chance to represent you in this big case.
No, I'm very appreciative that you did represent me. We're going to talk about that in a moment, and I'm sorry that I had to quote Elton John as I brought you in, of course, on this. But, I guess I'm a little biased in this fact, but I think this is a very important case. I think it's a very important win for our listeners who are wondering, well, what is this all about? This case stems back now 2+ years. If you remember, in late March of 2023, there was a biological woman who identified or pretended to be a man who stormed into a Nashville Christian elementary school and brutally murdered, shot dead 3 third graders and 3 staff members. At that time, I was under the employ of a great news operation based in Nashville. It was Tennessee Star is their anchor publication. They've done some fabulous reporting on that front. But their parent company and the editor-in-chief of that company, Michael Patrick Leahy, sued the Department of Justice to get what was called the Manifesto of the trans killer in Nashville at this school. And I was a plaintiff in that lawsuit. The DOJ, the FBI fought us. The Biden administration, DOJ and FBI, fought us tooth and nail. And thankfully, we had the good folks at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty who had our backs. And today, Dan, you can report that, victory is ours.
Yes, this was a case in which the Biden administration did not want the public to know what motivated this transgender shooter to shoot up this school and kill 6 people. Right away after the shooting, the press reported that there was a manifesto found in her car explaining her motivations for the shooting. And Johnny on the spot, just about a few weeks later, you guys filed a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA request, which says that, the government, if they have records, they have to turn them over to the public. And the FBI responded, the Biden administration, that, hey, this will interfere with law enforcement proceedings, which no one wants to interfere with the police. But in this case, it was kind of hard. It was kind of hard to figure out exactly how a sole shooter, a lone shooter with a manifesto when no one else was in the shooting, how releasing, and she was dead, by the way. How releasing?
Yeah, she was quickly shot by responding police officers. So, and they said right away, the Nashville Police Department said right away, we don't believe there are any accomplices here. She acted alone, this trans killer. And so that was the thing that I think galled not only us, but all kinds of reporters and news outlets. What sort of investigation would we be hindering or bothering to get this manifesto?
Yeah, what obviously was going on in the Biden administration is they wanted to protect what they believe was sort of the transgender agenda. And that if a transgender person did something despicable like this, that the transgender community would somehow be harmed if it came out that this person was otherwise bad, had bad motivations. And actually, now that we have the manifesto, we do know what her motivations were. She had significant anti-white motivations. Motivations against people based on the color of their skin, motivations based on her sexuality, other people's sexuality, a deep hatred of basically Western family values motivated her. And we know that the FBI had this information. They did not want to release it to the public, and they withheld it, requiring us to sue them. And all the way up through the end of the Biden administration, they fought us tooth and nail in court. And it wasn't until Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, was confirmed that finally, after we reached out to the FBI, we said, hey, why don't you just give us these records? This investigation is closed. The Nashville PD closed the investigation. FBI has closed the investigation. There's nothing to interfere with. Why don't you give us the records? Finally, FBI, under new leadership, said, yeah, we'll give them to you. And now we have seen sort of the full scope of her hatred of these little kids, this hatred of these parents, the hatred of the school, and the ideological sort of brainwashing she had received during her education.
And I think this whole episode revealed, as you mentioned, a great deal about the Biden administration playing politics over public safety. Deputy Counsel Dan Lennington of the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty joining us on the Dan O'Donnell Show. We were frustrated, you know that, we reporters over at the when I was with the Tennessee Star, because we wrote a lot of stories and we called a lot of sources to try to get information so that we could present the fuller story to the public, that the public, of course, demanded. They wanted answers as to why this was happening. So I know the frustrations involved with me reporting on the story. I know the frustrations involved with Michael Patrick Leahy as the editor-in-chief of the publication. Was this frustrating for you guys? Because you had to file a lot of briefs, a lot of paperwork in courts.
Yeah, it was very frustrating especially because this involved a school shooting. And I know a little bit about school shootings because after the school shooting in Florida, back, maybe 10 years or so ago, the Wisconsin legislature passed an appropriation setting up the Wisconsin Office for School Safety under Brad Schimmel. And we did a lot of, research with the law enforcement and teams. And one thing we found out is that it's very important for law enforcement to know what the motivations of a school shooter are, what their tactics were. It's also important not only for law enforcement, but also parents to know what are warning signs that your kids should look out for. What should you look out for? And we have had, since Columbine, we've had all sorts of information come out about these school shooters and what motivates them, what are their tactics, what are the warning signs to look for. And in this case, all that was just taken away from us. It was just all shut off. It was all turned off completely. The government, FBI, did not want anybody to know about the tactics or didn't want to know about the risks or didn't want to know about the motivations of the killer. You were just supposed to shut up and just go on to the next story. But yeah, we did spend a significant amount of time in this, and fortunately, the Trump administration also agreed to pay all of our attorneys' fees. If you are a prevailing party under the Freedom of Information Act, when you file a lawsuit, the government has to pay your fees. And so they've paid our fees. And so now we'll use that money to get more wins for liberty.
And what's nice about it is that yours truly and Michael Patrick Leahy, we want a small settlement too. They're taking us out to Arby's, and we can have all the curly fries we want. So that was very nice. I thought that was that last DOJ, not much of a class act. This new one, I'm digging where they're going. In all seriousness, Dan, I have a quick question, contemporaneously speaking. You know the situation in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, the horrifying shootings of the lawmakers last weekend. We're seeing, maybe it's too early, maybe I'm a little jaded here, but we're seeing some of the same things going on, maybe from local law enforcement, where we're not getting all of the information out about, I don't know if you can say manifesto here, but some of the background information regarding this suspected killer. Are you concerned we may have law enforcement trying to cover up information like we saw, unfortunately, in Nashville?
Well, all I would point you to is what are some of the biggest conspiracies perpetual America? You think about the Kennedy assassination. You think about more recently the Epstein files. Why do conspiracy theories spring up, and why do they percolate and expand and become more and more virulent and aggressive over time? It's because the government decides to withhold information. And we're finding out new things today about the Kennedy assassination that we didn't know back, the last previous decades. And we're information about the Epstein files is continuously being withheld. So what the public is left with is they're left with, well, let's make up our own reasons about why the government is withholding this information. And so when you have a situation like this where you have a shooter who's politically motivated, kills people, and then the government clams up about it, when we all know it was politically motivated, it just leaves people with a bad taste in their mouth, and it allows conspiracy theories to breed. And we still don't actually know much about the guy who tried to blow off President Trump's head in Pennsylvania, right?
Yes.
We know have very weird stories about his house, about his parents, about his cell phone usage, but the government still hasn't come clean. And a lot of your listeners may support President Trump and the Trump administration, but at the end of the day, I use the phrase "the government" is because the government is the one withholding information, and it's kind of a bipartisan problem. Both parties abuse the secrecy, leads to conspiracy theories. They don't want you to know things, and it's not really about whether it's Republicans or Democrats in charge. This is a knee-jerk reaction of all government, and that's why FOIA and Wisconsin open records law and open meetings law, why these things are very important tools that we should always use as citizens to inform ourselves about what is going on and not let the government just hide behind, vague claims of, it's an ongoing investigation, like, the Kennedy assassination is somehow an ongoing investigation. The Epstein, murders, him hanging himself in the cell is somehow ongoing. We can't know anything about that. But you have to hold government accountable. You can't let them just hide behind, these vague terms.
Yeah, and I will say this, we have seen this movie before, and I don't give a damn who's in control, the White House or in Congress. That information is rightfully that of the public, so that we can make decisions and figure out what we need to do to stop this sort of stuff. One final point on that: if they want to release the P. Diddy freak-off information, some of that probably should stay closed, just to save our stomachs. Anyway, Dan Lennington, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, always appreciate it. And hey, you're my attorney. What else can I say? Good stuff. Good work.
Thank you, Matt.